Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Testing Psychologist podcast, the podcast where we talk all about the business and practice of psychological and neuropsychological assessment. I'm your host, Dr. Jeremy Sharp, licensed psychologist, group practice owner, and private practice coach.
This podcast is brought to you by PAR. Conduct a broad-based assessment of personality and psychopathology with the gold standard Personality Assessment Inventory, or PAI. The new PAI Spanish revised translation retains semantic equivalence while using clearer and more inclusive language. Learn more at parinc.com/PAI.
All right, y'all, welcome back to the final episode in the year-end review series for 2022. Today I'm talking about growth. Were you content with your learning from the past year? And if not, how could you change that? That's what we're talking about today. Let's get to it. Okay, we're talking about growth and learning and getting better at what you do. This is a very challenging area for many of us. I see a lot of posts in the testing psychologist community and talk with my consulting clients about this a fair bit, actually. So making time for continuing education that actually feels meaningful and not just something that you do to check a box or to keep your license, but doing continuing education that actually feels helpful, that you can utilize and implement in your day-to-day practice. That's where I get stuck. I can read all day long and cruise, listen to podcasts and look at articles and so forth, but to actually apply them seems to be the most challenging step, at least for me. So what I'd like for you to do for this episode is just look back at the last year, look back at your CE practices. How'd you feel about that? I mean, one, did you get enough? There's that very practical component. Did you get enough to keep your license? Hopefully you did. And if not, that's okay. Let's think about how you might get some more. There are many opportunities for CEs. There's the podcast episodes, obviously, through @Health. The link is in the show notes. There's NAN webinars. There's No Neuropsychology. There are any number of conferences. Different state associations will put on continuing ed events. So lots of options to get more CEs. Let's see. And I've done episodes in the past on where to get CE credits for testing specific topics. So if you do a search, you should be able to find those as well. But let's be a little bit more deliberate. Is there anything that you would like to learn more about? And if so, jump on the calendar and set aside some time to do that. So this definitely flows back to the scheduling episode that I did last time. Scheduling is tough. So as part of your schedule, you may want to build in some learning time. So for me, this is typically 2 hours on a Friday. I call it learning time or research time, where I'll usually spend the first hour gathering some articles and reading through them, just a couple on a topic that is interesting to me. And then I try to spend the next hour actually implementing those things. So taking notes, thinking about how I might utilize that information in my practice, how to turn it into reality. That's just my system. You can do whatever you would like. But I think being deliberate and putting it on your schedule can be a great first step. Another thing that you might do is look ahead to all of the major conferences in the neuropsych world. So I went ahead and listed all of the 2023 conferences that I could think of. Well, I take that back. It's not a comprehensive list. I could think of more, if I'm being honest. But I listed the big ones. So I've got links to NAN, INS, AACN, AAPDN, and NASP. I did not include APA because I don't like APA and it's too big and I don't feel like it's very specific. But yeah, you can look at APA, that's easy to find. And I'm sure there are other conferences that you could look at, SPA, for example. So I listed a few there in the show notes so you can click through and look at some dates and see what works for you.
Let's take a break to hear from our featured partner. Conduct a broad-based assessment of personality and psychopathology with the gold standard Personality Assessment Inventory, or PAI. 22 non-overlapping scales cover a full range of clinical constructs, so you'll get the information you need to make a diagnosis and formulate a treatment plan. Plus, for your clients who speak Spanish, the new PAI Spanish Revised Translation retains semantic equivalence while updating language to be clearer and more inclusive. Learn more at parinc.com/PAI. All right, let's get back to the podcast.
See what you want to attend. I mean, pick one or pick none. It's up to you. But again, the idea here is just to take some time to reflect and be deliberate about what you want to do in the coming year. So whether you take action or not, that's up to you. But the idea of actually reflecting and being conscientious about your choices and learning and growth, that's what we're up to here. So I hope that the series has been helpful for you. Episodes are very short, but that's the idea. We're all strapped for time here at the end of the year, and these are just meant as little touch points so that you can look back, do some quick reflection, and potentially change things for next year. And give yourself permission to only do one thing. That's a downfall of these types of episodes is, it's exciting to think about changing all sorts of things. And yet that often doesn't play out in the long term. So if you pick one thing, that's plenty. And give yourself some compassion for whatever you implement or don't implement. All right. Now, as always, thanks for listening. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode. Always grateful to have you here. I hope that you take away some information that you can implement in your practice and in your life. Any resources that we mentioned during the episode will be listed in the show notes, so make sure to check those out. If you like what you hear on the podcast, I would be so grateful if you left a review on iTunes or Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And if you're a practice owner or aspiring practice owner, I'd invite you to check out the Testing Psychologist mastermind groups. I have mastermind groups at every stage of practice development, beginner, intermediate, and advanced. We have homework, we have accountability, we have support, we have resources. These groups are amazing. We do a lot of work and a lot of connecting. If that sounds interesting to you, you can check out the details at thetestingpsychologist.com/consulting. You can sign up for a pre-group phone call and we will chat and figure out if a group could be a good fit for you. Thanks so much. The information contained in this podcast and on the Testing Psychologist website are intended for informational and educational purposes only. Nothing in this podcast or on the website is intended to be a substitute for professional psychological, psychiatric, or medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Please note that no doctor-patient relationship is formed here, and similarly, no supervisory or consultative relationship is formed between the host or guests of this podcast and listeners of this podcast. If you need the qualified advice of any mental health practitioner or medical provider, please seek one in your area. Similarly, if you need supervision on clinical matters, please find a supervisor with an expertise that fits your needs.